My students often pose a question to me, one I've heard many times: why do I need to read in English? They'll say, I attend my classes, I complete all my homework, and I watch movies in English. So why should I add reading books to my routine? The truth is, reading is arguably the most powerful way to elevate your English skills. Let me explain why. First, let's consider the modern world. Reading is more critical now than ever before. Back in 2006, maybe 1 person out of 100 attended a university. Today, that number has jumped to 7 out of 100. This shift means that almost every job, far more than a century ago, demands stronger reading and writing abilities. This isn't just for office workers or academics. It's true for everyone, from mechanics reading complex digital manuals to artists writing project proposals. Second, reading will boost your speaking, writing, vocabulary, and grammar more effectively than any other single method. Now, you might notice I didn't say listening. Reading won't directly improve your listening comprehension, but it will dramatically expand your vocabulary. And when you have a richer vocabulary, you can understand spoken English more easily, which in turn allows your listening skills to improve naturally. When you were in school, you probably read a lot of English. You likely had to get through dull textbooks and short stories that were always followed by a list of exercises. But that is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about reading for pleasure. This means picking up a book simply because you enjoy it. You're not reading because a teacher assigned it or because you feel you should read it. You are reading purely because you want to. Let's look at some evidence. In 1965, researchers conducted an experiment in American schools for boys who had gotten into trouble with the law for things like theft. They divided the boys into groups. To one group, they gave free access to a library of fun books like adventure stories and spy thrillers. The researchers told them, you can do whatever you want, you don't have to read these books. But the boys did read. They read a great deal. Some boys were finishing a new book every couple of days. After 2 years, all the students were tested. The group that received the books showed significant improvement in their reading and writing skills. They also developed a more positive attitude toward school. The students who did not get the books showed no improvement. In fact, some of them had gotten worse. This principle isn't limited to native speakers. A similar experiment was conducted with students learning English in the Fiji Islands. They tested 3 different teaching methods. The first method was standard English instruction, grammar lessons, worksheets, and so on. The second method involved silent reading, where students simply read books of their choice in class. The third method was shared reading, where the teacher read books aloud to the students. After 1 year, the 2 groups that focused on reading performed far better than the students in the traditional English classes. The experiment was repeated in Singapore with similar results. The students who practiced silent reading achieved the highest scores, even on grammar tests. Think about that for a moment. Other students were attending specific grammar classes, yet the students who were simply reading for pleasure did better on the grammar exams. This shows that in a typical classroom, we are consciously trying to memorize grammar rules and vocabulary lists. When we read, we absorb them naturally, in context. Perhaps you're thinking, when I try to read in English, it's just too difficult. I have to stop and look up words in the dictionary all the time. It becomes boring, and I give up. I completely understand that feeling. That's why I've designed this collection of stories. I believe these stories will help you discover a love for reading because they are designed to be easy and enjoyable. The stories at the beginning are short and simple, and they gradually become longer and slightly more complex as you progress. By the time you finish, you will have a real sense of accomplishment. These stories are all fairy tales. Some are very famous tales you might recognize, while others are less common. One of them is an original story I wrote. Now, you might be thinking, fairy tales, aren't those for children? I need practical vocabulary for business or science. That's a valid thought, but it's not entirely accurate. The vocabulary in these stories is incredibly useful. A researcher named Dr. Mason conducted a study analyzing the vocabulary in 22 novels and found that 85% of the words were part of academic word lists, which are collections of words essential for university-level study. Two other researchers, Roberts and Gibson, wondered if students reading 1 million words of science fiction would learn the important science vocabulary needed for university. The answer was a resounding yes. So, believe it or not, fairy tales can be just as beneficial for your vocabulary. I understand if you're still skeptical. When I first learned about all this research, I found it hard to believe too. But I enjoy trying new things and I have a passion for learning languages. So, in 2017, I decided to conduct my own experiment. I had been trying to learn Spanish for a long time but wasn't making much progress in traditional classes. I set a goal for myself. I would read 1 million words in Spanish. Afterwards, I would assess my level. 1 million words is about 20 full-length novels, so it was a significant undertaking. I began with very easy material, much like the stories presented here. Then, I moved on to reading Spanish translations of books I already loved in English, like the Harry Potter series. This was helpful because I already knew the plot. Finally, I graduated to reading new books written originally in Spanish by celebrated Latin American authors. I also listened to podcasts, but I always made sure to read the transcripts and count those words toward my goal. After I finished my 1 million-word challenge, I tested my skills by writing and speaking with native Spanish speakers. The result? I had reached a solid intermediate level. I could understand nearly everything I read. I could follow conversations when people spoke clearly, and I could express myself in conversation. And remember, I had spent the vast majority of my time reading, not speaking. In just 1 year, I had learned more than most students do in 5 years of formal classes. I hadn't drilled flashcards or memorized grammar charts. I had learned it all naturally, through the stories. Now, you might be thinking either I don't believe this, or wow, I'm going to start reading for hours every single day. But before you do, I must share something crucial. You must read books that are easy for you. You must read books that are fun for you. If a book is too difficult or too boring, put it down and find another one. A brilliant expert in language acquisition, Dr. Stephen Anderson, says that you should only read things in English that you find genuinely fun and interesting. He even advises reading things that are so easy you might not read them in your native language, like comics, magazines, detective stories, or romance novels. Don't feel guilty about reading translations of books you already know. When you read very easy books, you can often guess the meaning of a new word from the context, so you won't need to constantly reach for a dictionary. So, what exactly is easy? Studies show that you should understand at least 98% of the words in a text. That sounds incredibly high, I know. Let me give you an example. Here is a short text where 10% of the words are nonsense words, meaning you understand 90% of the text. Michael flowered out of bed and opened the curtains. He beamed to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his puffer. Someone called his phone, and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was twirling, so his Vinky fell on the floor. Is that easy to understand? Could you imagine reading an entire book like that? Now, here is the same text, but this time, only 2% of the words are nonsense, meaning you understand 98%. Michael jumped out of bed and opened the curtains. He sang to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his toast. Someone called his phone, and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was calling, so his Vinky fell on the floor. How was that? You probably didn't understand every single word, like Vinky, but it was much more enjoyable to read than the first example. You could follow the story. That is the magic of reading for pleasure. You may not understand everything, but you understand enough to stay engaged with the narrative without the constant interruption of a dictionary. So, if you find that a book is too hard, please find something easier. If you find it boring, find something more fun. I know that not everyone will enjoy my style of writing, and that is perfectly okay. The goal is for you to find a book that is right for you. We learn so much more when we are having fun. Because I want this experience to be enjoyable, there are no exercises or quizzes in this collection. I considered adding them, but I believe your time is better spent simply reading more. Read for the sheer pleasure of it. When you finish these stories, you might feel ready to try something a little more advanced. Or, even better, perhaps you will have discovered a new love for stories. I certainly hope so. If you do want to read more, you can find a world of stories online, from podcasts with transcripts to websites with graded readers for learners. Happy reading and happy learning.